Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Phillie Phanatics podcast. This will be the minor league rundown edition for you guys. I think you're going to enjoy it. In this edition, I'm going to run through about the top 10 to 12 top Phillies prospects according to Major League Baseball, and then I'm going to dive around each minor league team, starting with Lakewood through Lehigh Valley, and kind of give you their record, where they're at in the standings, who's performing for them, who's not, and that way I can keep you guys up to date on what's going down on the farm, so to speak, because I know everybody follows along with the big league club, but not everybody pays attention to what's going down and the kids who are riding the bus and not making any money for a living. So let's dive right in. And our top prospect, according to MLB, is Alec Bohm, who was the third baseman we took out of Wichita State in the first round last year. He is currently with Lakewood Blue Caws and A-ball. In 17 games this year, he's hitting .367, so he's off to a nice start in the average category as well as the OPS. He has 2 home runs on the year, so he's starting to get that power going as he's getting to a groove and really working his way into his first full professional season, because Williamsport last year was a short ball coming right from college. So this is really his first kind of full year where he had an offseason to prepare, and it's good to see that he's off to a good start with 6 doubles, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, and the Lakewood Blue Caws have quite a few different prospects on that roster, but the number one, Alec Bohm, he is your third baseman of the future. They have his ETA at 2021, so a couple of years, but if he really lights it up, he could be up here by the end of next year. We'll give him a full year this year and a half a year next year if everything goes well, but they're saying he's going to need 2 full years because people are concerned with his defense and ultimately if that's where he's going to settle in at third base. Our second overall prospect and our top pitching prospect after trading Sixto Sanchez for JT Realmuto is Adonis Medina. Adonis is currently in the rotation for the Reading Fightin' Phils, and his ETA is actually 2020, so he is probably the next big arm who's a year and a half away. He's had 3 starts so far this year in 15 innings, giving up 15 hits, a couple of home runs. He's got a 3.00 ERA. Giving up a 246 average, so a little bit high, but he is in a hitter-friendly park there in Reading. As we know, the offensive numbers tend to be a little bit higher, so the pitchers in this league get a little bit of slack because it's known for being a hitter's league, and this is where they tend to thrive. But Adonis really, like I mentioned, is our top arm, and the next guy who's kind of really untouchable, or if we're going to make a move at the July deadline, you're really going to hear his name float around as one of the key pieces who really may have to be involved if we're going to go get a top flight starter. Our third overall prospect, also in Reading, is Adam Hazley. I always call him Hazley, and I know it's wrong. There's an extra E in there, so it's Hazley. But he was a first-round pick 2 years ago out of Virginia. He was a pitcher and a hitter. The Phils took him for his batting. He's starting this year in Reading with the Fightin' Phils in a loaded outfield. That includes Mickey Moniak, former number 1 overall pick, who we'll get to, as well as Cornelius Randolph, who is a lower prospect in the 20s or so ranked for the Phils, but a former first-round pick of 4 years ago. So they have 3 first-round picks currently playing outfield for Reading. Adam got off to a slow start this year and is currently still off to a slow start. He's only hitting .151 in 13 games. He did really well last summer where he was, and they were a little aggressive in his approach starting him here in Double-A because he spent about a half a year in Clearwater, but he did perform well, so this was an adequate spot for him. The only thing that's slowing him down is just adjusting to kind of that next level. That's one of the big jumps from Single-A to Double-A, because you do hear of people getting called from Double-A to the big, so it is kind of 1.5 steps away from the show. It's a lot of people with high-end talent who may not have a lot of control, but the pitches are there, and Adam's currently adjusting, so we'll see if he continues to bounce back and how his first summer goes at Double-A. Our fourth prospect and our shortstop of the future, after Gene Segura's contract runs out in 3 years, is currently a kid by the name of Luis Garcia. He is only 18 years old, and he's currently in Lakewood, which is A-ball. He is with Alec Baum. So that's going to be our left side of the infield, hopefully for the Phils of the future. We're going to have Alec Baum and Luis Garcia. They're going to be the next left side for a decade coming up here in a couple of years. But Luis, he's off to a decent start at Lakewood. He's hitting .207. Does have a couple of doubles. A few more strikeouts than you would like to see. He does have 18 strikeouts in 16 games to only 4 walks. But again, like I mentioned, only 18 years old. He's clearly young for this level. The Phillies are being aggressive with his path and hoping that he can continue to rise to the challenge and play a hell of a shortstop, which he's done. He's been great defensively and very smooth, but only 18 years old. His ETA is 2022, and that currently aligns when Segura's contract runs out. So that'll be when he's 21, 22 years old, and he'll have a little bit more development, and hopefully the offensive side will continue to round out as his defense is clearly the strength of his game right now. Our fifth prospect is a right-handed pitcher, the second pitcher on the list, to Spencer Howard. He has jumped up the list exponentially from last season and into this season. He's a right-handed pitcher. He was an early-round draft pick who tore it up at Lakewood last summer, and the Phillies moved him up to Clearwater this year. Starting pitcher in 3 games. He's 1-1 with a 3.14 ERA. Opponents are hitting .240 off him. A 1.12 whip is excellent, and late last season, he was up to 98 miles an hour on his fastball. He tends to sit 95, 96, but he does touch high 90s. The issue with Spencer that he's continuing to hone in, and once he does, will really be a tremendous riser and could be a name you guys are hearing more and more, but is his control. Obviously the velocity's there, but if he can hone in and develop a third pitch, that changeup I know he's working on, he's got a plus fastball, plus breaking ball. If he could get that changeup to where it needs to be and ultimately continue to miss bats, you're going to hear his name thrown around at the July deadline as somebody the Phillies want to hang on to, and hopefully you're going to see through. As he's a college kid, he's a little bit further along in his development, and you may see him sooner than later. The sixth prospect we have here is Enyel De Los Santos. Phillies fans out there know that name because he was up in the big leagues last year, pitched pretty well for him, and he started this year at AAA, so he's still on the prospect list. You guys will definitely see him this summer again up at the big league level at AAA. He's off to a good start again, 2-0 with a 2.81 ERA in 3 starts with opponents only hitting .217. So Enyel doing his thing. We'll see him up in the big leagues here if one of the starters falters or if we run into the injury bug that continues to bite the team. And same thing goes for our 7th break prospect, JoJo Romero. We didn't see him at the big league level yet. They actually went with Ranger Suarez, who's 10th on the list. We'll get to him. But JoJo was in AA, and he's moved up to AAA this year, where he's had a little bit of a rough start. So it's, a jump for these guys still to go from AA to AAA. And in 3 games for JoJo, he's got a 9 ERA. Opponents are hitting .327. So he's running into the fact that, you get some quad A guys up there who are professional hitters who are, have played in the bigs up and down or on rehab assignments, things like that. And, you get guys like Phil Gosselin who come up and contribute and were at AAA for the beginning of the year. And JoJo's making that adjustment. I think he'll be fine. He's the first left-handed pitcher we have on this list, our top lefty. I know the Phillies are still looking for that next left-handed stud. And right now it's between JoJo and Ranger, and who's really kind of that next name internally that's going to step up for these guys. Number 8 is a name that not a lot of people know, but Francisco Morales. Francisco is currently in Lakewood. Let's see, they signed him actually in the international pool for just under $1 million. He made a great first impression. He's struggling a little bit this year at Lakewood, though. A 7.59 ERA in 3 starts. They're flip-flopping him from the bullpen to the starting rotation. They're kind of figuring out what his future is going to hold, but he really does have the stuff to contribute down the line. Our 9th prospect is Mickey Moniak. He got off to a good start at AA, but has recently fizzled out a little bit. He is only 20 years old, so he's still young for that level. In 13 games for Reading, he's hitting .212. He does have 2 home runs with 4 doubles, so he is swinging for a little bit more power. And like I mentioned, at only 20 years old, his body is still continuing to develop, and he has a great future ahead of him, and people who are writing him off yet, I think, is just fuel for his fire. And the reports of his demise are definitely exaggerated as he continues to, find himself. Like, he's growing into his body, he's putting on weight, he's going to continue to develop, and they're continuing to be aggressive with him. He's seeing good arms, great talent at the AA level, and for him to kind of put together a little bit of that power streak is something that the Phillies, I think, are looking for. But the strikeout numbers do continue to be a little bit of a concern. 17 strikeouts to only 4 walks in 13 games. I know the Phillies preach quality at-bats, long at-bats, working the count, and walking over striking out with McCutchen and Harper, being 1-2 in the National League in walks. But this will continue to come as he sees quality pitching right now. He's swinging at a lot of breaking balls that are falling out of the zone based on some of the highlights I've seen on Twitter. I know Major League Baseball is limiting those highlights, which is ridiculous, but that's a whole nother podcast we'll get into. I think good things are still ahead with Mickey, and as he develops a relationship with Adam and Cornelius there in Reading in the outfield, I think they'll continue to thrive as the summer carries on. The 10th prospect, and one of the last guys we'll dive into individually, is Ranger Suarez, and he's currently in the AAA rotation. We saw him up in the big leagues for a few starts for a left-handed pitcher. He was the first one since Adam Morgan had started in years past, and I know that was kind of a big deal that a guy was going right from AA to the bigs, but he was on the 40-man roster, so it made sense, and it was easy for them to manipulate the system and get him up to the bigs without having to make a ton of roster moves. But this year so far, at Lehigh Valley in 3 starts, 6.75 ERA. Opponents are hitting 328, so he is getting hit around a little bit. But that happens in April. Pitchers are still kind of finding their rhythm, their timing, and you've noticed that at the big league level that sometimes it takes a handful of starts to really click and get on your mechanics and get on time on your delivery and become that dominant pitcher that you can for the rest of the summer. Now we'll dive around team by team briefly here and take you guys into how the teams are performing, a few names who aren't maybe top prospects but are performing for these guys. And we'll go lowest to highest on the totem pole here on the farm and start with our Class A level Lakewood Blue Claws. Like I mentioned, Alec Baum off to a hot start, leading the team in hitting at 367 through 17 games with a couple of home runs. A few other names to look out for. We got Matt Cron at first base, having a solid year, 278, but not a lot of names jumping off. Alec really carrying the load there, and a few pitchers who have been performing well. Let's see here. We got Tyler Carr, relief pitcher, who's only given up 1 run in 9 innings, and Kevin Gowdy bouncing back as a former second-round pick. He's got 3 starts under his belt with a 2.79 ERA. So good for Kevin, who had Tommy John coming out of high school, second-round pick. They paid him higher than his draft slot in order to get his talents into the system. So it's nice to see his rehab has paid off, and he's off to a good start. I know he had a plus breaking ball, and that was the wrap on him early coming out of high school. But 11 walks, 10 strikeouts. 9 innings, so finding that command coming off the surgery, that's going to happen. The kid hasn't pitched in quite some time, so nothing really alarming there. Lakewood currently off to a little bit of a slow start as a team. They're actually in last place in the South Atlantic League Northern. They are 5-13, but just a few names to kind of keep your eye on there. And if you're in the New Jersey area, head on over to the ballpark and see some guys and some quality arms. For those of you listeners who are in the Florida area and Clearwater, you guys need to get to the park to catch out the Threshers. They are currently off to a slow start themselves as they are 6-12 and in last place in the Florida State League. However, they do have a few individual performers who are establishing themselves early on here with Matt Vierling, a minor leaguer there, hitting 317 in 16 games. He's off to a good start. Simon Molziati, who's also on the prospect list, hitting 267 in the early going. That's a solid start for him there. Jalen Ortiz in 8 games, only hitting 200. He's a big name to look out for, playing outfield, possibly first base, big hitter we got in the international pool who you definitely could see on some prospect lists coming up here. On the pitching side of things, let's see, we got Damon Jones to a tremendous start. Spencer Howard, like we mentioned, off to a pretty good start. This pitching staff actually is not doing a bad job here to start for Clearwater. If you're a listener in the central Pennsylvania area, get on out to see the Reading Fightin' Phils. They're 7-7, so off to a decent start here to start the year. They're performing better than the 2 A-ball teams we have, with Clearwater being the high A team. This is double A in Reading, to where Ali Castillo at third base is having a heck of a start, hitting .364. But like I mentioned, you got your outfielders, Cornelius hitting .229 here in 10 games early, Mickey Moniak .212, and Adam Hazley .151. But that's the outfield potentially of the future. That's a thing to keep your eye on if you're in Reading. I think I'm going to get out there for a game or two, check it out, watch those guys swing the bat, and continue to hopefully live up to the hype. On the mound, we have ourselves J.D. Hammer. That's a name I didn't mention earlier, but somebody to look out for. He's got a 1.29 ERA in relief in 7 innings. That's a name you could see move to AAA sooner than later and potentially in the big leagues by the end of the year if they continue to have struggles with Nicasio and Alvarez and others already going up and down in the bullpen. Adonis Medina we touched on. Tom Eichelman down there not having a good start to his year. He had a heck of a year in AAA 2 years ago. Last summer, not so much. And then this year, not off to a great start again. But rounding out the minor league rundown, we have the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, who are actually a really good ball club because the Phillies are obviously contending, trying to win the division, and a lot of the other prospects and talent at AAA is right there knocking on the door, and that's leading them to a 12-4 record here from the jump. And they got quite a few names carrying the load here offensively. Andrew Romine, shortstop. Sean Rodriguez still playing, hitting .300 down there, and a bunch of different names across the board contributing. And on the mound, that's where they're excelling right now. We got Cole Irvin, who's having a hell of a start to his year in 3 games, 3 starts. He's only given up 3 earned runs in just about 18 innings for a 1.53 ERA to lead the way. De Los Santos we touched on. Ranger Suarez struggling a little bit. But the other names to keep an eye on, too, that we could see come up and down are Tom Wendell. He's a relief pitcher who's doing well so far. You could see his name, Yaxel Rios, 284. You've heard his name at the big league level. Drew Anderson, we've already seen. Eichhoff is up currently. So a lot of turnover, a lot of injuries at the big league level, but I don't know if everybody's paying attention down on the farm. So I wanted to keep you guys updated on how the top prospects are doing and then the teams in general. And, we'll do this kind of once every couple of weeks. If something crazy happens, they move somebody up a level, I'll keep you guys informed. But until then, as always, I do appreciate you guys listening. Let me know if you like this kind of a podcast. We can dive into it a little bit more. Hopefully talk to one of these guys by the time the summer is out and we continue to grow our audience and we can become a little bit of the Phillies minor league podcast out there. But we do appreciate you listening as always, and I appreciate you guys listening. I know I'm putting in some time here late, and the feedback's been that you guys are enjoying the content, enjoying listening, and I just hope to always continue to bring a smile to your face out there. So this is Miho from the Too Close to Call cast. That was the Phillies Phanatics minor league rundown. We appreciate you guys listening.